Morning. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'll wait a couple minutes, see if a few more get on. Okay. There's 8 of us. Let me turn off my phone so it doesn't ring. All right, here come a few more. So guys, this is actually our last class because I am giving you next week's class to get that PowerPoint in because it is due next Tuesday. So the only way that I can encourage this to get done by you is to actually give you the class time to do it. So I'm going to. So your PowerPoints are due to me by the end of the day on Tuesday, the 11th. So I'm going to give you the class period. So for starters, does anybody have any questions about the PowerPoint? I'm going to go to week 15. Yeah, look at my emails. Let's go to week 15. So this is your last week, and your PowerPoint slide presentation is due. So it says the 15th. I need to change that to the 11th. I need to take off course journal because that's already done. I will change this. It's the 11th. Any questions on the presentation?
We can do it on PowerPoint and
And load it to Canvas?
yes.
As long as you can speak over it. The
Okay.
whole point is that you are giving a presentation. So if you know how to use PowerPoint and be able to record yourself speaking over it, that's fine. If not, use what they actually give you a software.
I actually think if I remember correctly, because I did something like this for a summer class last year, if you use like Studio and set up like a webcam, you could also do something like that as well.
I think so too. I do agree, but I'm not 100% sure of the program. So I know Studio is what, you can use to record. So I know Studio definitely does that.
Okay.
I just don't know how it interacts with PowerPoint if you're using PowerPoint. I don't know.
I thought we was using the screen website. We could still use that website, right?
Oh, of course,
Okay.
yeah. As long as it can be loaded in Canvas, the only things you need are you need to do the PowerPoint presentation according to the way that the department has set it up, and you have to be able to speak over it. If you want to be seen, you can be seen in the corner. If you don't want to be seen, it doesn't matter to me. You just have to do what is required. That's all.
Okay. I'll check Studio again. I'll email you sometime.
Okay. All right.
But I figure I ask you. But I figure I ask you about it.
Okay. I know Studio records. That I know with 100% is what it does. I just don't know how it interacts with the slide presentation.
I think if I remember correctly, if you share your screen or something like that, there's a little place that it can show you as well. But I was able to do it. Like I said, I did it over the summer last year, and it did it for me. So
Okay.
it probably does the same. But I just figured ask if Studio's fine.
Sounds good. So it's a 10-minute presentation, so it has to be close to the 10-minute mark. In other words, it can't be 5 minutes, and it really shouldn't be 25 minutes. There's no need for that. Nobody wants to sit through that. So try to get it around 10 minutes, as close as possible. So as I said, I'm giving you the whole class period. So this will be our last class, so we will not be getting on Zoom. And it will be an assurance. Nobody can say I didn't have time because I'm giving you the class period. So there's no I ran out of time situation with this. This week, let's go to week 14. So today we're going to go over therapies and treatments. We went over all the psychological disorders last week. This week we're going to do like, what can you do about it? So you also know that this month is Mental Health Month. So no matter what morning show you put on, they're doing something about Mental Health Month. It's really productive. And one of the things that is interesting is that TikTok has played an amazing role in mental health for children this year. With being so separated, there has been so much more mental health um, occurrences, and people have taken to TikTok to discuss what's going on with them, but there have also been therapists that have gone to TikTok, and it is opening up the world, especially for teenagers, which is great. So this week we're going to, this class, we're going to talk about the different therapies that exist. And then your assignment is based on your discussion from last week. So you last week, the majority of you did it in completion. A lot of you did not complete all 4 steps. You write a great initial post, and then you don't go back, you don't write on people's posts, and you don't write on your own post. I'm not sure why, but we need you to complete these. When you're in college and your assignment is to do 4 parts, I'm generous because I give like 10 parts per each, but other teachers are just going to give you a 0 because you didn't complete it. So if this is your first, semester at school, my word to the wise is do all the parts of an assignment so you get full credit. So we're going back to that fictional character that you picked last week and described their mental illness. And you're going to do an assignment this time, which is different than the discussion book. This is a 200 to 400 word essay, and you're going to describe 3 different treatment methods to help treat that fictional character's disorder. So there was a lot of Winnie the Pooh, there was Rapunzel, there was Christopher Robin, there was Fairly Odd Parents, there was, Vicky. I'm trying to remember some of your others. Somebody from SpongeBob Squidward, I believe, was mentioned. So there were a few of them. And so you should, I think Rapunzel from Tangled, I'm trying to remember them all, but you're going to write about that fictional character and write 3 different treatment methods. Coolio? Okay. So let's go into therapies and treatments, which is we're week 14. Let me just get my board with some markers for some grading of words. Okay. So we talked about all the different mental behavioral healthcare concerns and disorders that occur in last week's chapters. So when we talk about treatment, any one of these characters or any people needed treatment for what they were diagnosed as having. But back in the early 1900s, if you remember, I said that there was no such thing as mental illness. It meant when you were acting bizarrely or you had bizarre thoughts that you were possessed by demons and you needed exorcisms. And if exorcisms didn't work, they would do things called trephining, which meant they actually drilled a hole in your head so that the spirits would get out of your head. Most people died when you bore a hole into somebody's head. They're probably going to die. The majority of them died. If the exorcisms and the trephining didn't work, then they were put into asylums. They used the electroshock therapies to try and help cure them of these evil thoughts. So it wasn't until the 1960s that behavioral health care took giant steps to realizing that people had illnesses and they didn't need to be locked away. So in the 1960s, deinstitutionalization occurred, which meant that people could receive treatment from home, group homes, living in the community. That was when antipsychotic meds came about, and they didn't need to be locked away. So they were locked away in institutions, and in the 1960s, deinstitutionalization happened. As a matter of fact, in 1963, JFK signed funding to deinstitutionalize. So it was governmental top down, which was really good. So it wasn't until the 1960s. So prior to the 1960s, people who had mental illness were just locked away. So most people who have some sort of behavioral health concern get help. It's around 20%. Only half of children get the help that they need. 26% of homeless, at least 26% of homeless have mental illness. And most people who are in our justice system have some sort of behavioral health care concerns. So when there is a behavioral health care concern and they're in the justice system, they might have, they might be involuntarily, I don't want to use the word committed because that sounds like institutionalization. So they might be involuntarily told that they have to obtain behavioral health care services, which means that they went through the courts and it is not their choice. The majority of people voluntarily attend to behavioral health care concerns, which means they choose to attend. And it wasn't until 2008 then an act came about, and it was called the Parity Act. The Parity Act came out in 2008, which actually was the first time that psychological treatment equaled medical treatment. Prior to 2008, insurances didn't cover therapies the same way. You paid a lot out of pocket. And in 2008, it was finally passed that if you need antibiotics for an infection, it's the same thing as needing mental health treatment for a behavioral health care concern. So the Parity Act in 2008 was the first time that it forced insurance companies to acknowledge that they need to pay for these services so people can get better. Because an antipsychotic med is equitable to a antibiotic for a infection in your body. So that's how therapies came to be. Let's talk about types of treatment. So when we talk about therapy, we're in psychology, so we're talking about psychotherapy. So we're in psychology, we're talking about psychotherapy, and that's it's a psychological treatment that employs methods to overcome personal problems and increase growth. Psychotherapy is a psychological treatment that employs methods to overcome personal problems and increase growth. So we have all types of psychotherapy, but no matter what type of therapy that is done, they have to have 3 parts for it to be successful. The treatment has to be appropriate. The therapist that you go to has to have expertise in that type of therapy. And the client has to be invested in the treatment. Those 3 parts will be the parts for success. Treatment is appropriate, expertise of therapist and client is invested in it. It's a pandemic. So what changed in psychology today that probably wasn't around as much before a year ago?
Thinking about more like health, maybe.
Sure, but let's just keep it to psychotherapy. What changed in psychotherapy in the past year? What became huge?
Depression.
Yes, but that is
From the pandemic, an increase of depression. Is that what you're going for?
all of that is true. Everything you all have said, but we're talking about treatment now. You're going back to the actual diagnosis or disorders. We're focusing on treatment now. What has happened in treatment in the last year? What has exploded due to the pandemic in treatment?
I don't know. They're making more medicine.
They're not really making more medicine. Medicine's about the same. Could you go in person during the pandemic, especially at the beginning? Could you go in person for treatment?
No.
No. So what happened?
Telemedicine.
Say that one more time, Reagan.
Telemedicine.
I'm hearing something medicine.
Like on the phone, like over the phone.
Okay, so even more so than phone, it became virtual. Virtual therapy exploded in this last year. Web-based therapies got so big this year because people were not going face to face. And so it was virtual, like we're doing. And there became apps. There were all kinds of apps that you can go to and speak to therapists. That's not in any of the textbooks. If you went to a psychology textbook that was written prior to right now, and if I wrote a psychology textbook today, it's not going to be printed for 6 months to 8 months. So right now, psychology textbooks that are printed don't even speak about the ability for psychotherapy virtually and with web-based apps. So that is brand new, but it exploded this year with the pandemic. So it's something that we definitely refer to when we're talking about psychotherapy, which is kind of new. So the first guy to do anything with psychotherapy was Freud. And if you remember all the way back to like week 1, when we talked about Freud, Freud has his own type of therapy, and it's called psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is purely Freudian, okay? Because Freud believes that all of your mental distress has to do with childhood trauma. So if you feel that something is going on with you because of your childhood upbringing, then you would look up a psychoanalyst. that would only be doing teachings of Freud. They would not use any of the techniques that are used today by therapists. If you believe that you are who you are based on your parents and your upbringing, you would look up a psychoanalyst who does psychoanalysis, and they would look into repressed memories and childhood drama. Freud did dream analysis and free association. In free association, that's when a client, a therapist would say a word and a client would say anything that comes to mind, regardless of how embarrassing or unimportant it may seem. And according to Freudian studies, they would tell you what's wrong with you based on free association and dream analysis and all that type of stuff. Okay, so he's very, very, very specific. We're going to talk about a few other types of therapies, such as play therapy. I think we mentioned it last week or maybe a couple weeks ago about play therapy. You've seen it on CSI and Law and Order when a child is involved in something and they use play therapy to have them bring it out so that they can depersonalize it. So if kids are playing or drawing, they might draw something like, for instance, if their dad is abusive, they'll never say that their dad is abusive. But if they draw a picture of a mom and a child, and then they draw the dad, but they scribble it out in black like he's a bad person, they're able to interpret through play therapy. Or sometimes kids mirror what's going on when they're playing with dolls. So it's stuff they've seen or they've heard. So they might, these therapists know how to bring children to reveal things through dolls and stuffed animals. So that's play therapy. Behavior therapy has to do with changing undesirable behavior. And it uses classical and operant conditioning. So we talked about having phobias. And so your phobia, you can desensitize through classical conditioning. So if you are fearful of flying, you have a phobia of flying, you're going to desensitize by taking little steps to get you to the point where you can actually fly. So it might first be looking at pictures of airplanes, then you might watch a movie about airplanes, and eventually you might go in a simulator, and then you might just go on an airplane that doesn't fly first, taking baby steps and then eventually flying. And that's desensitization. That's part of classical conditioning. They use classical conditioning for people who have substance abuse. So for instance, if an alcoholic just cannot stop drinking, they might use what's known as aversion therapy, which is classical conditioning. So there's a little pill that can be dropped in your drink of alcohol, and it will make you throw up and be very, very sick. And eventually you will stop wanting to drink the alcohol because you will have, associated that feeling of sickness with alcohol, and you will use, and that's aversion therapy. So that's classical conditioning and behavior therapy. In operant conditioning, a token economy is an example of operant conditioning. So if people are in like the juvenile justice system, you get more with reward than punishment. So if they're in a juvenile home, a token economy means that you get tokens for doing things good. These people that are in the juvenile system have had a lot of bad in their life. And so you get more with rewarding them for good than penalizing them for bad. So if they make their bed in the morning like they're supposed to, they get a token. If they attend therapy when they're supposed to, they get a token. And if they don't, they just don't get the token. So it's not really a taking something away from them. It's just not giving them something. And so they have goals based on what motivates them to use those tokens for. If it's to go see a movie, or if it's to go meet with friends, or it's something, they can build up the tokens to get to that. So that is a form of operant conditioning. Another something that you might think of in operant conditioning is, I'm sure you've heard of ABA therapy with children with autism and adults with autism. And so you're trying to shape the behavior with reward. That's what ABA therapy is to get rid of an undesirable behavior. So if a child is screaming as part of their autism, you would like to change that behavior and reward them when they're not screaming, so that they make the connection that not screaming is the good behavior and it's rewarded. So that's ABA therapy. There's cognitive therapy, which is actually the most utilized today, cognitive therapy. It's how thoughts lead to feelings of distress, or how you think leads to how you feel and how you behave. That's an easier way of remembering it. How you think leads you to how you feel and how you behave. So cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy takes all of that into account, and it has to deal with your thinking and your behavior. So the concept of cognitive therapy is to correct illogical thoughts. If you correct illogical thoughts, your behavior will be right on the path. So the ABC model is what's used in cognitive therapy, and that is action, belief, consequence. ABC therapy is action, belief, and consequence. That is all part of cognitive therapy, which is the most utilized therapy. Now, just going back for half a second to me talking about behavior therapy, plain behavior therapy, and talking about things like addiction and stuff. Addiction is humongous in behavior therapy. And 40 to 60% of people that have addiction problems relapse. So therapy is usually about 3 months, because that's what insurance will pay for. But being that 40 to 60% relapse, more than half or about half, obviously it's way more intensive than 3 months. So it's really important to understand that addiction is lifelong and not this 3-month thing. So insurance, it's always about money. You guys know when I'm talking to you about all of these treatments, it's always about money. So addiction is a expensive treatment, because as I said, it's lifelong, and you can't just work on it for 3 months and then be cured. It is lifelong. So I just wanted to go back. I hadn't mentioned that to you. Your next type of psychotherapy is called humanistic therapy. Humanistic therapy is help, the goal is to help people achieve. It's very client-centered. It has to do with active listening and empathy. It is not about advice. So if you came to me and I was a humanistic therapist, the majority of people go to therapy for help, okay? Help me with this. What can I do about this? And you're asking for a professional's opinion. If you go to humanistic therapy, they're going to just reiterate what you have said so that you can hear it another way. They are not giving advice. They are not giving you their conscious thought. They are just empathizing and reiterating. So, my husband is awful. He hits me. I can't take it anymore. What I hear you saying is that it sounds like you're in a domestic abuse situation that has been going on for a long time, and that you finally reached the point where you'd like to do something about that. Is that correct? So did you hear? I did not give any opinion. All I did was reiterate what they said so that maybe they hear it differently for the first time and are willing to take action on that. That is humanistic therapy. Mindfulness therapy is having an awareness of thoughts, body sensation, environment. So meditation is a type of mindfulness therapy. Yoga is a type of mindfulness therapy. It's about acceptance of your thought. Now, the biggest one that we didn't discuss in types of therapy is called biomedical therapy. Biomedical therapy involves medication or a medical procedure to treat a psychological disorder. Another term for biomedical therapy is pharmacotherapy, like the word pharmacy. Pharmacotherapy is another term for biomedical therapy, using medication or medical procedures to treat psychological disorders. Now, does it work? Yeah. 80% of the time, biomedical therapy is effective. Now, going back in the day, when they used lobotomies, that wasn't effective, but that was biomedical therapy because they were doing a medical procedure that they thought would help with these behavioral health care concerns. But, and the other thing is that this doesn't cure the psychological disorder. It's just treating symptoms. That's very important to discuss. So when we talk about psychotropic meds, which are psychological meds to help these psychological orders, if you have schizophrenia, you're going to be prescribed an antipsychotic. If you have depression, you're going to take an antidepressant. If you have an anxiety disorder, OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, you're going to take an anti-anxiety. If you have bipolar disorder, you're going to have a mood stabilizer. If you're diagnosed as having ADHD, believe it or not, you're taking a stimulant. Believe it or not, it actually acts the antigen and calms you down with ADHD stimulants. Oh, have you guys heard of electroconvulsive therapy? Who knows what electroconvulsive therapy is?
Never heard of that before in my life.
Really?
Never did.
Carriel?
When they shock you, it's like shock therapy.
Shock therapy. So electroconvulsive therapy is where they literally electroshock you. Now, you would say it's 2021. That sounds medieval torture, right? Why are we still using electroconvulsive therapy? And the answer is because it works. So what happens is with electroconvulsive therapy, the brain is shocked and it forgets. So if you're super depressed, and again, this is a treatment that happens after nothing works. It is like a last ditch effort because it is invasive. So you have major depressive disorder and you have tried every type of medication and every type of therapy and nothing has worked. Then you go for electroconvulsive therapy and they shock your brain. And what happens is it kills brain cells. So you don't remember the reasons you're depressed, and it works. You're not depressed. But we all know that the memory regenerates, right? We talked about neurogenesis and that everything regenerates. And if people go back to the same surroundings that they were depressed in, it's going to increase that memory because you're going to remember things quicker. And your memory is going to eventually regenerate and you're probably going to go back to that depression. But it did work for those couple months when you weren't depressed. So it does work. And people who have electroconvulsive therapy often have it multiple times. So it's not a one shot and done, as I said, because of neurogenesis. But speaking of memory, there is another type of therapy called reconsolidation. All right, let me write that one down for you. The root word is reconcile. The root word is reconcile, but it's reconsolidation. So this type of therapy means that your memory is at the core of whatever is causing you psychological distress. So when we're talking about something like post-traumatic stress disorder, your memories are what is driving your psychological disorder. And so we need to change the memories. You need to change certain details and try to remember other things so that it's not always bad. So when you go to that type of therapy, you're going to be asked to recall good things about that time that caused you stress. So let's say that you were sent overseas during a time of war and conflict, and you have PTSD because of that. What this type of therapy is going to do is they are going to try to supersede the bad memories with good memories. So you're going to have to like revisit and really think about good things that happened when you were in like Afghanistan. So you're going to have to come up with these details of good things during this time of conflict. So it might be that you made some really great friends because you were in a troop together. It might be that you actually met your future wife. It might be that you learned a skill when you were out there. So when you use that type of therapy, you're trying to change the memories with details. And then there's eclectic therapy, which is combining the aspects of all of these, taking a little bit of each of these. So there are different types of the way that these therapies are conducted. Most of the time, people think of therapy as individual therapy, which is involving one client and one therapist. So it's one-on-one. And the most constructive type of individual therapy is weekly, but that always depends on therapist's time. But we do know that weekly therapy works one-on-one. You could have group therapy. Oh, excuse me. Group therapy is a session in which several clients participate together. They usually have something in common. Therapy doesn't work with large groups of people, so 5 to 10 people are ideal. When you go to an AA meeting, it is group therapy. And if you go to a family therapy, that is also group therapy. When you go to couples therapy, that is considered group therapy. So when you go to couples therapy, it's usually about a relationship and its strategies to succeed. That's the goal of couples therapy. The goal of family therapy is to see the family as a whole, but also each individual growth within the family. So that is group therapy. When you go for therapy, you initially start with what is known as an intake, which is an assessment of your needs for the therapy. You are going to be assured about confidentiality, which is huge. You are going to develop a treatment plan, which is the objectives for the therapy. Now, your treatment plan or these objectives need to be measurable because you have to see if you're making growth in that therapy. So your treatment plan needs to be measurable. And your therapist has to have cultural competency. So whether we're talking about culture, meaning understanding your surroundings and your upbringing and your culture, or we're talking cultural competency like in the pandemic, that is the culture right now, or it could be your generation, that's cultural competency too. So you have to trust your therapist, and your therapist has to really understand where you're coming from. That's really important. I don't know if you guys know this, but there is nothing that prevents somebody from saying they're a therapist. If you took this intro to psychology class and you thought that you learned everything that you needed to be a therapist, you could rent an office on Main Street and hang out a sign that says Charles McGill therapist. And if people want to come and pay you, they can. Because right now there's nothing that certifies you, except that insurance is not going to pay for somebody that does not have the right credentials. And when I say the right credentials, have you ever seen the initials after a landscaper? If you called the landscaper to come to your house and they hand you a business card, they have these initials after their name, DDFB, JKL, semicolon, whatever. And you would go, oh my God, look at all these initials. They must be specialists in everything. Well, initials after your name don't really mean anything. But to a funding source, an insurance company is not going to pay somebody who has taken one class from Middlesex County College. It's not going to happen. Even if you got an A in this class, you can't open it because insurance is not going to pay. Insurance is going to pay for a doctorate of psychology, a master's of social work. They're going to pay for an LSW, an LCSW, a licensed counselor of social work. They're going to pay for a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They're not going to pay for you, but there's nobody stopping you from doing it, just so you know, which is why the burden falls on you. If you go for therapy, make sure that you're going to somebody who specializes in something that's pertinent to your therapy. So the burden falls on the client. Now, we just talked about all of these web-based apps and these virtual therapy appointments. Again, it falls on you to make sure that you're not speaking to Bubba from jail who decided to start a web-based app about therapy. You have to make sure that these people are licensed. So again, it falls on you. There are a couple barriers to therapy. Minorities do not have access to therapy as much as non-minorities. Low socioeconomic status, people that don't have the money for therapies. If you're working a job that gives you health insurance, psychological services are part of it. But if you're a day laborer, you don't have insurance, you can't afford therapy. And we can also refer to the stigma around therapy. There is still a stigma around getting help for yourself. And that is the goal of Mental Health Awareness Month right now, is to lessen the stigma of getting the help you need. If you had a sore throat, you would go to the doctor to get the help you need because you probably have a throat infection or a throat disorder. Let's just use that term. So why wouldn't you get the help you need if you're suffering from something behavioral health care? There's a stigma. So Mental Health Awareness Month, which it is right now, is all about getting people to understand that it is the same exact as needing a medical treatment. Get the help that you need. So, does anybody have any questions about what we just did, which was the chapter on therapy and treatment? So your assignment that is due on Saturday is to take the same fictional character that you used in your discussion post last week for this week's assignment. You're going to do your study plan, take your quiz, review all this stuff we discussed, and in your assignment, you're going to discuss three types of therapy that would help your fictional character. It needs to be 200 to 400 words. It is due on Saturday. On Tuesday, we will not have class. I will give you that hour and 20 minutes to make sure you get your your presentation in, which is due on Tuesday. So this will be our last class. So I just want to say that it was really nice meeting y'all. I wish we could have known each other better. If we were in a classroom, we would definitely have way more of a bond. And I do hope that you continue your psychological studies or whatever else you do. I know some of you, like Jake, are going on to big colleges, but if you're staying at Middlesex and I teach another psychology class, I would love to have you again. I don't know how it works. I have teaching in class, which is one way, and teaching virtually, which is using, this Lumen book. And I did put in announcements. There is a survey that they would like you to take about how you learned using the process of having that study plan, taking the quizzes. Remember, if you were doing a purely virtual class, this is called remote live, where we log in. But if you were taking a virtual class, you would be doing the same exact thing with the study plan and the discussion. You just wouldn't have a class. You would just have to hand in your work. I like much better connecting and being able to teach. I did both last semester and found that virtual was far less successful. Remote lives, people did much better in the class. So this is, catch me by email. I'll be happy to connect with you, but it was really nice teaching you this semester. And if you need anything in the future, drop me a line, and good luck in your future studies, and have fun with the presentation. It'll be nice to watch, make it creative if you can.
I will say this, overall, I enjoyed this class more than sociology.
Well, good. Yay. I mean, if we were in the classroom, Charles, I play all kinds of games. Thanks, Bryce. When we're in a classroom, we're playing Jeopardy. I played psychology baseball, where you're running around the classroom. Jake would have loved that. Where you answer questions that give you singles, doubles, triples, and home runs. It's sad that we're remote, but we tried the best, we could do. But I hope you learned something. That's the goal, is to have learned something. So thank you and good luck, and enjoy your summer. I don't know if you're taking classes, but enjoy your summer.
I got a summer semester.
Have a great summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so weird, right? Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Bye, Professor.
Bye. So weird.